It turns out that all four banks, that's that green arrow down there, all four banks, if you combine their gross fair positive and gross fair negative values, you find out that it nets out that they're just in the hole about $756 million of net exposure. And of course, that could change. Tomorrow's market conditions might be different from today's, whatever. But that's how they add these things up. And again, it's all good as long as things are stable. This is why the Federal Reserve spends so much time watching the markets, pumping the markets, rescuing the markets, throwing cash in whenever necessary, because this whole thing is growing up and out. Editorially, after the great financial crisis, I agree. People looked into that. Things had gotten out of control. The regulators had fallen completely down on the job. The Federal Reserve wasn't doing its job. Wall Street ran amok, and we almost went towards that bright light in the sky. Right? It was literally very close to a lights out event for our financial system. So they said that was terrible. They had closed door sessions. They wrote laws, and they said we shouldn't do that again. But instead of making the big banks smaller so they weren't too concentrated and making sure that the derivatives were not so large that out of band high sigma event could drag the whole system down, they actually encoded it so that those bets get paid off first and can capitalize off of the balance sheets of the other players, including brokers, clearinghouses, etc. They did that. And so now guess what? You'll be surprised, totally surprised. We now have larger banks and more derivatives than we had at the height of the great financial crisis. Oh, but now they're more carefully regulated, Chris. Let's talk about this because there's a problem hiding in this. First, we're just talking volumes. According to the BIS, $7.5 trillion per day of derivatives trading is happening just in the OTC, which is over the counter. And it's very hard to get a good measure of these OTC amounts. That's why this is from April 2022. That's the most recent they could add this up. Like, we don't know. It's very hard to get these sort of data because OTC, often you just have to go to every single trading desk and ask what they're doing. So it's very difficult data to get. There's no particular button you can press and get this updated data because it's not tracked that way. But still, what's interesting is when you look at this, I've highlighted a couple things. Out of that 7.5 trillion a day, the official sector, that's central banks, the official sector is busy trading tens of billions of dollars of derivative contracts per day. Like, what exactly are they doing, those central banks? Tens of billions of dollars per day of spot transactions and outright forwards, and they're doing foreign exchange, which is, maybe the lion's share, about half of what they're doing, but they're trading in some pretty big stuff there. You can imagine a central bank doing Forex and currency swaps, but they're doing outright forwards and things. It's weird. I'd like to get some data on that. But as well, look at that big yellow blob in that corner down there. So this is showing by country. The United Kingdom is actually still the king of the place where you would trade OTC derivatives. London is by far the largest center of this. So if you thought old Blighty lost the Revolutionary War and sailed quietly off into the sunset, empire waning in the distance, they've kept their hold on things here pretty tight from a financial standpoint. So just putting that out there. Now, Buffett, back in 2007, he said derivatives, a fool's game, right? So he said, at his talks, I think it was at their annual meeting, he repeated his warning on the dangers of derivatives, saying, quote, that excessive borrowing by traders, investors, and corporations will eventually lead to significant dislocation in the financial market. So this is in 2007. Of course, he was very prescient about this. Obviously, by October 2008, he was right, And he said here, quote, the introduction of derivatives has totally made any regulation of margin requirements a joke. Referring to the government's rules on limiting the amount of borrowed money an investor can apply to each trade, he said, I believe we may not know where exactly the danger begins and at what point it becomes a super danger. We don't know when it will precisely end precisely, but at some point, some very unpleasant things will happen in markets, end quote. Oh, he was absolutely right. Has he changed his mind? Well, this is from 2016, and he kept on with this, and there's more recent quotes. Same thing, fresh warnings. This is Buffett, right? One of the most seasoned, awesome investors out there, very careful, does the due diligence, thinks these things through very carefully. And here, this is post Dodd-Frank, which went in 2010. This is post the lessons we were supposed to have learned from the great financial crisis. And we're 6 years past all of that. And what does he say? He says, emphasizing a warning he gave last summer, When he described derivatives as weapons of mass destruction, Mr. Buffett said a major event, such as a cyber attack that shut down the financial markets, would trigger, not could, would trigger enormous gaps in things you thought might be protected by collateral. Now, that's what we've been talking about. What is the collateral backing these derivatives? It's your stocks and bonds. It's all the collateral in the system. It's all the treasury notes. It's all the muni bonds. It's all the equity issues out there. You don't know it because you can't peer into it. But that's what this whole book, The Great Taking, is about in my exploration of it. And it's true, as far as I can unravel, that you can't answer this simple question. This should be easy. Who owns that? Right? Hey, here's my statement, and it shows that I have a fidelity fund with treasuries in it. Who's the senior claimant? I own a share of this fund, but who really owns it? You should be able to answer that very simply. It should be, here's the simple answer. It ought to be you. You are. But it's not that simple. Are you aware of the risks to your wealth in the next big economic crisis? Well, hello, I am Dr. Chris Martenson, and I have done hundreds of hours of concentrated research and collaborated with legal and securities experts on all aspects of the concepts covered in the book, The Great Taking by David Rodgers Webb. Together, we have identified 7 key strategies that you can leverage immediately to protect your wealth from these risks and regulatory takings. Join me and 6 industry experts, including David Rodgers Webb, on June 15th at 11 o'clock Eastern for a digital webinar with live Q&A, where we will outline and explain all of these strategies and how you can leverage them to protect your wealth. Further, your ticket will allow you playback of the webinar once it's posted. They can't answer the question, and often they don't even know. And so if we get to one of these moments where there is a reset, a great reset, and they have to scramble, and you have to settle every derivative, and you have to settle every trade, and you have to do this in accordance with what are the qualified financial contracts and who has senior claim and all this other stuff, we're going to discover that there's a lot more claims than there is actual underlying assets. That's what Warren Buffett is talking about here when he says a cyber attack could shut down financial markets, and it would trigger enormous gaps in things you thought might be protected by collateral. You thought you were doing a deal with somebody who had the collateral, but they didn't have the collateral. They were doing a deal with somebody they thought had the collateral, but they didn't have the collateral, and on and on. Like, who owns it is really important. And of course, possession is 10/10 of the law when it comes to these sorts of things. He said, I regard very large derivative positions as dangerous. We inherited a modest sized position at Berkshire's reinsurance vehicle, General Ray, in a benign market. And we lost about $400 million just trying to unwind it with no pressure on us whatsoever. These are some of the best investors out there, and they lost $400 million just trying to get rid of this stupid derivative portfolio that they inherited. By the way, the accountants blessed that big derivative position as being worth a lot of money. They were only off by what? A few hundreds of millions, added Charlie Munger, then the vice president of Berkshire. May he rest in peace. So here's the problem. Wall Street acts as if derivatives have somehow shot the risk of life, of financial products, into outer space, never to be seen again. And that's not actually how that works. As I wrote, I think this is from last year sometime when I was writing, this is from my website, when I was writing for my subscribers, I said, about derivatives and what might happen. I said, obviously, if you get a cascading series of domino defaults, it's going to be a problem. This is exactly why they froze the CDS paper during the 2008 meltdown. That's a credit default swap paper. Not only didn't the big banks want to pay off the scrappy little hedge funds, which we saw in The Big Short, but they were also worried about setting off a systemic disaster. The main complaint I have about this system of derivatives is that it does something really dumb. It acts as if risk has been somehow shot into outer space. That's not a thing. Risk doesn't go away because you spread it out. It merely gets spread out. Risk cannot be eliminated, only diluted, which means ultimately you have more risk-taking behavior, and therefore derivatives promote the accumulation of more risk, not less. So we have more risk today, not less, because we have more derivatives, not fewer, than we did back at the apex of the great financial crisis. Like twice as many. It's crazy. Carrying on, but everyone acts within their own portfolios and on their own balance sheets like the risk has entirely disappeared. Hey, I'm hedged. I have these bonds, but I've bought a credit default swap. good to go, right? That may be true for them, but it can't be true for everybody as a group. So where did the risk go? If everybody individually thinks their risk has been taken away, where'd it go? Because it's an accounting identity. You can't make risk go away. It's kind of like, well, the chance of my house burning down is 1 in 1,000 on any given year, say. But if we put 1,000 houses together, my risk has gone away entirely. Like, no, didn't go away. Just, didn't happen. So I write here, I submit that risk is still there waiting for the right moment to suddenly reconcentrate, wipe out various participants, possibly in a cascade of defaults that will be exceptionally messy as we rediscover where the risk was hiding, who was holding the bag. In the end, though, it's always good to remember this. A derivative is just a legal contract. It's a document. It's a fat sheaf of papers that sits in a folder or on a hard drive. It's an agreement that falls under contract law. So any messy meltdown becomes a protracted, expensive, and mostly endless payday for lawyers. So I think Mark Twain said it best. We have to remember this now. I think when you look at a system that's grown up and, in fact, institutionalized what I would consider to be fraud, and the fact that I can't find a single person yet who can explain exactly how this whole system of derivatives and contracts and laws and the plumbing and piping of collateral and flows, I can't find any one person who knows all of that stuff anymore. So Mark Twain said, it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Agree with that. Insurance only works if everyone doesn't use it at once. Like if you were an insurance company and you insured this entire town of houses and they all burn down at once, you don't have it, you're broke, right? Insurance doesn't work unless it's operating within a stochastic model where very, very unusual things aren't happening, right? Excess deaths haven't gone to World War II levels on a percentage basis. Every house doesn't burn down all at once. Something like that. That's how it works. So if derivatives are insurance policies, they only work until you really need them, like this town needs their fire insurance in California. So Martinson's rule, risk cannot be eliminated by spreading it around. It still exists. Corollary, the more people spread this risk around, the more they will accumulate across the entire system. It's kind of like if we said, well, I'm standing here in this tub of cow manure, and it's only this, it's coming up close to my ankles. But good news, we're now going to spread it around on this tennis court. Oh, look, we can actually spread a lot. In fact, give me some more. We're going to spread this all around this tennis court. And then all of a sudden, something happens. Oops, tennis court goes away, and we have to put all of that risk that we've been putting out there back into this tub. Well, now it might be up to my eyeballs, right? This is just how this works. So this is what a derivative position of one of those single large four banks might look like. It is literally just going to be box after box of legal documents or the equivalent on a hard drive. It is that's what it is. So you know what's going to happen when there is one of these big, giant, scary market clearing events, right? Well, when you positively need resolution right now, these derivatives claims are going to be tying up the courts for decades and decades. It took till 2012, I think. And then finally 2018 to begin to unwind this stuff for the Lehman disaster. And so that's what derivatives are. Remember, they're not a thing. This is stuff, right? A derivative is just a contract. It's an agreement, set of agreements. And they could be very complicated agreements. So remember what we said before in earlier section, which was part 3, which was under Title 12. This part actually exists, this exact language exists in, just in case you missed it, in case you're slow like me, right? This exists in Bankruptcy Code, which is Title 11, the Banking Code, which is Title 12, and also Uniform Commercial Code. Article 8 says the same thing, which says this, which is notwithstanding anything else written anywhere else, any provision, any state or federal law, just throw all that stuff out the window. The corporation or anybody else acting as a receiver may not avoid a transfer of money or other property in connection with any qualified financial contract with a covered financial company. So your company your broker gets in trouble. Oh no, they're frozen. You can't get to your subordinated security entitlement claims. Sorry, you have to wait until we resolve this. Could take months, could take years, but we'll get you your stuff back eventually. But meanwhile, somebody who has a derivative position like Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, right? Any of those companies, any of the four big banks, any bank or any hedge fund or anybody has a qualified financial contract with that same brokerage. Well, it says here, they get to reach in and take any money or other property, any other property. Yeah, take what you will, right? And remember, derivatives are these financial contracts, right? So if you take that together, look, you can't avoid the transfer of these things which are derivatives. And derivatives are how big? Really big. You know, the explosive device has been installed. So global debt and liabilities are a couple, 2.5 quadrillion. So we've got 300 trillion of global debt. We got 1.5 trillion of derivatives. We've got unfunded liabilities. Add it all up, it's a big number, right? That's 2.3 trillion plus some others. It's just really large. So with that, that is what I wanted to tell you about derivatives, right? So understand the difference between notional value and actual value at risk. Understand that value at risk is just a snapshot in time, that if things get fat and pear-shaped and we get out there in those high standard deviation tail risk areas, that suddenly the calculus of derivatives may change a lot, that they are financial contracts, but they are contracts that have first dibs on the collateral in the system. You're going to be shocked to find out that the collateral in the system is not even as identified as you might think it is.